The dust on Clara Bennett's boots told the story of 15 hard miles walked before dawn, and the single glass jar of honey clutched against her chest represented everything she had left in this unforgiving world. She stood at the edge of the ranch, watching the morning sun paint the Texas landscape in shades of gold and amber, gathering her courage before approaching the sprawling house that belonged to the cowboy everyone called Jack Morrison. It was September 1881, and the drought had stolen nearly everything from her small homestead on the outskirts of San Antonio, leaving her with one struggling hive and a desperation that tasted like copper in her mouth. Her father had died of fever that spring, her mother 2 years before that, and the bank had sent notice that they would take the land if she could not pay what was owed by month's end. Clara was 22 years old, alone, and running out of options faster than water ran out of a cracked bucket. The Morrison Ranch stretched across the horizon like a kingdom, with its neat fences and fat cattle grazing in pastures that somehow stayed green despite the relentless sun. She had heard about Jack Morrison in town, heard the whispers about how he had built his fortune through honest work and smart dealings, how he treated his ranch hands fairly, how he had never married despite being nearly 26 and having his pick of every eligible woman in 3 counties. Clara did not care about gossip or romance. She cared about selling her honey for enough money to buy time, maybe to buy hope. Her fingers tightened around the jar as she forced her legs to move forward, past the wooden archway that marked the entrance to the property, down the well-maintained path toward the house. A man emerged from the barn before she made it halfway, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes that caught the sunlight like polished amber. He wiped his hands on his denim pants and walked toward her with an easy, rolling gait that spoke of countless hours in the saddle. "Morning, miss," he called out when he was still 20 feet away, his voice a deep rumble that carried easily across the space between them. "You look like you have been walking a while. Can I help you with something?" Clara straightened her spine, refusing to let exhaustion or desperation show on her face. "Are you Jack Morrison?" "I am." He stopped a respectful distance away, his gaze curious but kind. Up close, she could see the sun-weathered lines at the corners of his eyes, the strength in his jaw, the way his shirt stretched across his chest. "And you are Clara Bennett. I have a homestead east of here, near the creek that dried up in July." She held up the jar of honey, letting the morning light catch in the amber liquid. "I came to sell you this. It is honey from my last hive, the purest you will find in all of Texas." Jack's eyes moved from her face to the jar, and something shifted in his expression, a softness that had not been there before. "Your last hive?" "Yes." She would not lie, would not pretend her circumstances were anything other than what they were. The drought killed the wildflowers. The bees could not find enough to sustain more than 1 hive. "This is all I have to sell." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she held his gaze, refusing to be the first to break. Finally, he gestured toward the house. "Why do not you come inside, have some breakfast, then we can talk about your honey." "I do not need charity, Mr. Morrison. I need to make a sale." "It is not charity to offer breakfast to someone who has walked 15 miles before sunrise," he said gently. "And my mother raised me better than to do business with a lady on an empty stomach. Please, I promise the biscuits are worth the detour." Clara hesitated, torn between pride and the very real hunger gnawing at her stomach. She had eaten nothing but a piece of stale bread the day before, saving what little she had for the journey back. "I do not want to impose." "You are not imposing. I am inviting." Jack smiled, and the expression transformed his face, turning stern handsomeness into something warmer, more approachable. "Come on. The coffee is already hot." She followed him to the house, a sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch and windows that gleamed clean in the morning light. Inside, everything was neat but lived in, the furniture solid and well-made, the floors swept clean. He led her to the kitchen, where he pulled out a chair at the large wooden table and gestured for her to sit. "I live alone," he explained as he moved around the kitchen with surprising competence, pulling out plates and cups, checking the coffee pot on the stove. "Never got around to marrying, so I learned to cook for myself. Nothing fancy, but it fills the belly." Clara set the jar of honey carefully on the table and let herself sink into the chair, feeling the ache in her feet and legs now that she had stopped moving. She watched as Jack brought over plates filled with biscuits, bacon, and eggs, followed by 2 steaming cups of coffee. The smell alone made her mouth water. "Go ahead," he urged, sitting down across from her. "Eat. We will talk business after." She wanted to maintain her dignity, to eat slowly and carefully, but the moment the first bite of biscuit touched her tongue, her resolve crumbled. She ate like someone who had forgotten what abundance tasted like, and Jack said nothing, just ate his own breakfast and occasionally refilled her plate when she emptied it. When she finally sat back, feeling more satisfied than she had in months, she found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That was kind of you. It was nothing." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "Now tell me about your honey." Clara reached for the jar, unscrewing the lid and letting the sweet, floral scent fill the kitchen. "My father kept bees for 20 years before he passed. He taught me everything he knew. This honey comes from bees that pollinated sage and mesquite blossoms, wildflowers that grow near the creek when there is water. It is different from regular honey. Richer. Better for cooking and better for healing, too. My father used to sell it to the doctor in town." Jack leaned forward, genuine interest sparking in his eyes. "May I?" She nodded, and he dipped his finger into the golden liquid, bringing it to his lips. She watched his expression change, surprise and pleasure crossing his features. "That is remarkable," he said after a moment. "You are right. I have never tasted anything quite like it." He was quiet for a beat, then looked at her directly. "How much do you need?" The question caught her off guard. Not how much for the honey, but how much did she need? "What do you mean?" "I mean, how much money do you need?" "You did not walk 15 miles to sell me a single jar of honey unless you were desperate. So tell me what you need, and we will work backward from there." Clara's throat tightened. She had expected to haggle, to argue her case, to fight for every penny. She had not expected kindness, had not expected to be seen. "The bank wants $100 by the end of the month, or they will take my land. I need seed money for next season, money for supplies to keep the bees alive through winter." She swallowed hard. "I need $200 to have any hope of starting over." Jack nodded slowly, as if she had simply told him the weather forecast. "All right, I will buy your honey, all of it, however much you can produce. I only have this one jar. I told you the others did not survive." "I know what you told me." He stood up, walked to a cabinet and pulled out a tin box. From it, he counted out bills, laying them on the table between them. "Here is $300. 200 for what you need and 100 for the honey you are going to produce." Clara stared at the money, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I cannot accept this. I do not have honey to sell you, not yet, maybe not ever if the drought continues. Then I am investing in the future." Jack pushed the money closer to her. "You said you have 1 hive left. That is one more than none. That is something to build from. Why would you do this? You do not know me. You do not know if I can deliver on any promise." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on hers. "My father started this ranch with nothing but a dream and a stubborn refusal to quit." He died when I was 16, and everyone told my mother to sell, to take what she could and move back east. But she did not. She kept going, kept fighting, kept believing that something could come from nothing if you worked hard enough. Someone gave her a chance when she needed it most. A loan she should not have qualified for, from a banker who saw something in her worth betting on. He gestured to the money. I am doing well, Clara. I have more than I need. If I can give someone else the chance my mother got, then that money is better spent than sitting in a tin box. Tears burned at the back of Clara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. If I take this, I will pay you back, every cent, with interest. I do not want interest. I want honey when you have it to sell. He smiled slightly. And maybe I want to know that someone else is out there, fighting the same fight my parents fought. That matters more than money. She looked at the bills on the table, at the lifeline being offered, at the man who had shown her more kindness in one morning than she had experienced in months. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and picked up the money, folding it and tucking it into the pocket of her worn dress. I will not let you down, Mr. Morrison. Call me Jack, and I do not think you could let anyone down if you tried, Clara Bennett. He gathered up the breakfast plates, carrying them to the basin. When will you go pay the bank? Today, if I can. The walk back to town will take most of the afternoon. Jack turned around, drying his hands on a cloth. I need to go into San Antonio anyway. I will take you in the wagon. Save you the walk. You have already done too much. I have a wagon and you have feet that must hurt like hell after walking here. It is not charity. It is common sense. He hung up the cloth. Besides, I need to pick up supplies and I would appreciate the company. Gets lonely, talking to horses all day. Despite everything, despite the overwhelming relief and gratitude and confusion swirling inside her, Clara found herself smiling. All right, thank you again. The ride into San Antonio took just over an hour, with Jack handling the horses with the kind of easy competence that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. They talked as they rode, the conversation flowing more naturally than Clara would have expected. Jack told her about the ranch, about the challenges of keeping cattle healthy in a drought, about his plans to dig new wells and expand into horse breeding. Clara told him about her bees, about the magic of watching a hive work together, about the way her father used to sing to them and swear they sang back. You really love them, Jack observed as they passed the first buildings on the outskirts of town. The bees, I mean. I do, Clara admitted. They are remarkable creatures. People think of them as simple as just insects, but they are so much more. They communicate, they problem solve, they work together toward a common goal. Each bee knows its job and does it without complaint, and the whole hive benefits. There is something beautiful in that, something worth protecting. Jack was quiet for a moment, then said, I would like to see them sometime. Your bees. If you would be willing to show me. Something warm unfurled in Clara's chest, something that had nothing to do with the Texas heat. I would like that. At the bank, Clara walked in with her head high and her spine straight, Jack at her side like a quiet sentinel. The banker, a portly man named Hutchins who had looked at her with barely concealed disdain every time she had come to plead for more time, straightened in his chair when he saw Jack Morrison walk through the door. Mr. Morrison, what a pleasant surprise, Hutchins said, his tone obsequious in a way that made Clara's stomach turn. How can I help you today? You can accept Miss Bennett's payment, Jack said evenly. She is here to settle her account. Hutchins's gaze slid to Clara, surprise and something uglier flickering across his face. Is that so? Clara pulled the money from her pocket, counting out the $100 owed and laying it on the desk with steady hands. This settles my debt in full. I would like a receipt, please. The banker counted the money slowly, as if hoping to find it short, but the amount was exact. Grudgingly, he wrote out a receipt and slid it across the desk. "Your account is settled, Miss Bennett. For now." "For good," Clara corrected, pocketing the receipt. "Thank you for your time." Outside, she took her first deep breath in what felt like months, the weight of impending loss lifted from her shoulders. Jack touched her elbow gently. "You all right?" "Better than all right." She looked up at him, this man who had changed her life in the course of a single morning. "Thank you, Jack, for everything. You are welcome." His hand lingered on her arm for just a moment longer than necessary, his touch warm even through the fabric of her sleeve. "Now, what do you say we get those supplies you need? If you are going to rebuild your apiary, you will need equipment." They spent the next 2 hours in town, visiting the general store and the lumber yard, purchasing new hive boxes, tools, and supplies that Clara had only been able to dream about before. Jack insisted on loading everything into the wagon, and when Clara protested that she had not budgeted for all of this, he simply smiled and said, "Consider it an investment in my future honey supply." By the time they headed back toward her homestead, the wagon bed was full, and Clara felt something she had not felt in a very long time: hope. Jack drove her all the way to her property, a small plot with a weathered cabin, a struggling garden, and a single beehive sitting in the shade of a scraggly mesquite tree. He helped her unload everything, stacking the lumber near the cabin, organizing the supplies on her small porch. "This is a good piece of land," Jack said, looking around with an appraising eye. "Good bones, just needs some care and water." "It was my father's dream," Clara said softly. "He wanted to build something here, something lasting. Then we will make sure that happens." Jack turned to her, his expression serious. "I meant what I said, Clara. I am invested in this now, in your success. So if you need anything at all, you come find me." "Understood," she nodded, not trusting her voice. He climbed back into the wagon, tipping his hat to her. "I will come check on you in a few days, see how you are settling in with the new equipment." "You do not have to do that." "I know I do not have to. I want to." He smiled, and Clara felt that warmth in her chest again, spreading through her like honey dissolving in hot tea. "Take care of yourself, Clara Bennett." She watched him drive away, dust rising behind the wagon wheels, and pressed her hand against the pocket that held the remaining $100, the seed of her new beginning. For the first time since her father died, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be all right. The next days passed in a blur of activity. Clara worked from dawn until dusk, assembling the new hive boxes, preparing spaces for them near the creek bed where wildflowers might return when the rains came, tending to her single surviving colony with renewed determination. She cleaned the cabin, patched the holes in the roof, weeded the garden, and planted the seeds she had bought in town. The work was hard, her muscles aching and her hands blistered, but it felt good. It felt like progress. True to his word, Jack appeared on the third day, riding up on a beautiful chestnut mare with a bag of supplies tied to his saddle. Clara was working on assembling a hive box when she heard the hoofbeats, and she straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead and trying to ignore the way her heart jumped at the sight of him. "Afternoon," he called out, swinging down from the saddle with easy grace. "Thought I would see how the work was coming along." "It is coming," Clara said, gesturing to the 3 completed boxes sitting in a neat row. "Slowly but surely." Jack walked over to inspect her work, running his hand along the smooth wood, checking the joints. "These are well made." "Your father teach you carpentry too?" "He taught me everything he could. Said a woman needed to know how to take care of herself, especially out here." She set down her hammer. "What is in the bag?" "Lunch. Figured you might be too busy to stop and cook for yourself." He untied the bag and pulled out wrapped sandwiches, apples, and a canteen of cold water. Plus, I wanted an excuse to see you again. The admission was so casual, so honest, that it caught Clara off guard. She felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. You do not need an excuse. You are always welcome here. They sat in the shade of the mesquite tree, eating and talking, the conversation flowing as easily as it had on the ride to town. Jack told her about a problem he was having with coyotes near the northern pasture, and Clara suggested hanging strips of cloth soaked in ammonia along the fence line, something her father had done to keep predators away from the hives. Jack told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders when his father died. It must have been hard, Clara said quietly. Being so young and having to take on so much. It was. But my mother was strong, and she taught me to be strong too. She taught me that you do not get to choose what life throws at you, but you do get to choose how you respond. He looked at her, his amber eyes warm in the dappled sunlight. Kind of like you. You could have given up when things got hard, but you did not. You kept fighting. I did not have a choice. You always have a choice. You chose to keep going. That takes courage. Clara did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just let the words settle into her chest like a gift. After lunch, Jack helped her finish the hive boxes, his presence making the work go faster and feel lighter. They worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed tools back and forth, their conversation punctuated by comfortable silences. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, Jack finally stood, brushing sawdust from his pants. I should head back. Got to check on the evening chores. Thank you for coming, Clara said, walking him to his horse, and for lunch, and for the help. It was my pleasure. He swung up into the saddle, then looked down at her with an expression that made her breath catch. I was thinking, if you would like, maybe you could come to the ranch for dinner sometime. I would like to return the favor, cook for you like you let me feed you breakfast. You cooked me breakfast, Clara pointed out, a smile tugging at her lips. Then I owe you dinner. His grin was boyish, charming. What do you say? Day after tomorrow she should say no. She should maintain a proper distance. Remember that this was a business arrangement, that Jack Morrison was too good to be true, and kindness always came with a price. But the words that came out of her mouth were, I would like that very much. Good. I will come get you around 5. Wear something comfortable. He tipped his hat to her and rode off, leaving Clara standing in the yard with her heart beating too fast and a smile she could not quite suppress. That night, lying in her narrow bed with moonlight streaming through the window, Clara let herself think about Jack Morrison in a way she had been trying not to. She thought about the kindness in his eyes, the strength in his hands, the way he listened when she talked about her bees as if her words actually mattered. She thought about the way her pulse quickened when he was near, the way his smile made something warm bloom in her chest. She barely knew him, had only met him a few days ago, but already he had become tangled up in her thoughts, in her hopes for the future. Do not be foolish, she whispered to herself in the darkness. Do not mistake kindness for something more. But even as she said it, she knew it was too late. She was already halfway to falling for Jack Morrison, and the knowledge terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The next day, Clara rode into San Antonio on the old mare her father had left behind, a gentle creature named Bess, who had seen better days but still had plenty of heart. She needed to purchase a few more supplies, but if she was honest with herself, she also wanted to buy fabric for a new dress. The realization made her feel foolish and giddy and young in a way she had not felt in years. In the general store, she found a bolt of blue cotton, simple but pretty, the color of a clear Texas sky. It cost more than she should spend, but she bought it anyway, along with thread and new buttons. At the counter, the shopkeeper's wife, a woman named Martha who had always been kind to Clara, smiled knowingly as she wrapped the fabric. "Special occasion, dear. Just needed a new dress," Clara said, trying to sound casual. "Hum. And I suppose it has nothing to do with Jack Morrison coming around your property." At Clara's startled expression, Martha laughed. "Honey, this is a small town. Word travels fast. Half of San Antonio knows he drove you into town in his wagon and bought you supplies." Clara felt her cheeks burn. "It is not like that. He is just being kind. Jack Morrison is a good man, one of the best, but he does not spend his time helping just anyone." Martha leaned across the counter, her expression turning serious. "He has had plenty of women chasing after him for years, Clara. Rich women, pretty women, women who could bring him connections and money. He has never given any of them the time of day. If he is coming around your place bringing you lunch, it is because he wants to. You think about that." All the way home, Clara thought about little else. By the time she arrived back at her homestead, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She spent the evening at her small table, cutting and sewing the blue fabric by lamplight, her stitches careful and even. She had learned to sew from her mother, who had believed that a woman should be able to clothe herself and her family with skill and pride. The work was soothing, rhythmic, and by the time she finished, she had a simple dress with a fitted bodice and a full skirt, modest but flattering. The next day passed in agonizing slowness. Clara busied herself with chores, checking on her hive, working in the garden, but her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. She bathed in the tin tub she dragged into the cabin, heating water on the stove and scrubbing away the dust and sweat of hard work. She washed her hair, dark brown and falling past her shoulders when freed from its usual braid, and let it dry in the sun while she did her afternoon chores. At 4 o'clock, she put on the new blue dress, her fingers fumbling slightly with the buttons. She brushed her hair until it shone and pinned it up in a simple style, leaving a few soft curls framing her face. She had no mirror large enough to see her full reflection, but she looked down at herself and felt, for the first time in a long time, pretty. Jack arrived exactly at 5, driving the wagon again, dressed in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed. When he saw her, his eyes widened, and he climbed down from the wagon seat with the kind of careful attention that made Clara's stomach flutter. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice carrying a rough edge that sent shivers down her spine. "Thank you." She smoothed her hands over her skirt, suddenly nervous. "You look very nice as well." He helped her up into the wagon, his hand strong and warm around hers, and they set off toward his ranch as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The ride was filled with easy conversation, Jack telling her about a foal that had been born that morning, Clara describing her plans for expanding the apiary in the spring. But underneath the casual talk, there was something else, a current of awareness that made every accidental touch feel electric, every shared glance feel weighted with meaning. At the ranch, Jack helped her down from the wagon and led her into the house, to the dining room where the table was set for two with actual china plates and real napkins. Wildflowers sat in a jar in the center of the table, their simple beauty more touching than any elaborate arrangement could have been. "Did you pick those?" Clara asked, surprised and charmed. "I remembered you talking about wildflowers, about how your bees love them. Thought you might like to see them even if they are not blooming as much this year." He pulled out a chair for her. "Sit. I will bring out the food." The meal he served was simple but good. Roasted chicken with herbs, mashed potatoes, green beans from his garden, and fresh bread with butter. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing from serious to playful and back again. touching on topics ranging from politics to poetry to the price of cattle. Jack was well-read and thoughtful, his opinions considered but not rigid, and he listened to Clara's views with genuine interest, even when they disagreed. "You should have gone to university," Clara said at one point. "You have the mind for it." Jack shrugged. "Maybe. But I had responsibilities here. And honestly, I cannot imagine doing anything else. This land, this work, it is in my blood." He looked at her curiously. "What about you? What did you dream about before the drought and your father dying?" Clara was quiet for a moment, remembering a younger version of herself with different hopes. "I wanted to be a teacher. I love reading, love learning. I thought maybe I could help children discover that same love." She smiled sadly. "But life had other plans. You could still do that. Once you get the apiary going, once things are stable, you could teach. Maybe." Clara did not let herself hope for it, but the idea planted itself in her mind nonetheless. After dinner, Jack showed her around the ranch, walking with her through the barn where horses nickered softly in their stalls, past the pastures where cattle grazed in the twilight. They walked slowly, their pace unhurried, and gradually Clara became aware of how close they were walking, their shoulders nearly touching, their hands swinging in the space between them. When their fingers finally brushed, Jack caught her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm, and Clara looked up to find him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Is this all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she whispered, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They walked hand in hand back to the house as the stars began to appear overhead, and when they reached the porch, Jack turned to face her, still holding her hand. The lamplight from inside cast golden shadows across his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the softness in his eyes. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low and serious. "I did not help you just to be kind. I mean, I wanted to help you because it was the right thing to do, but that is not the only reason I kept coming back." Clara's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "What is the other reason?" "You," he said simply. "From the moment you walked onto my property with that jar of honey and determination in your eyes, I could not stop thinking about you. I have never felt this way before, Clara. It scares me and thrills me and makes me want to be a better man." He lifted his free hand to her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. "I am falling for you. I think I started falling that first morning, and I have not been able to stop." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes, but they were good tears, joyful tears. "I am falling for you too," she confessed. "I tried not to. I told myself it was foolish, that I barely know you, but I cannot seem to help it." "Then do not help it." Jack leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers. "Let yourself fall. I promise I will catch you." When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet, and everything a first kiss should be. Clara melted into him, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart beating as fast as her own. The kiss deepened, growing from tender to passionate, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their faces flushed. "I should get you home," Jack said reluctantly. "It is getting late. I suppose you should." But neither of them moved, standing close together in the lamplight, unwilling to let the moment end. Finally, Jack stepped back, though he kept hold of her hand. "Come on, before I forget myself entirely and ask you to stay." The ride back to Clara's homestead was quiet, but it was a comfortable, full silence, both of them processing the enormity of what had just shifted between them. When they arrived, Jack walked her to her door, his hand warm and steady in hers. "Can I see you again tomorrow?" he asked. Clara smiled. "I thought you were coming to check on the hives anyway." "I am, but I want to see you too, not the hives. You, then yes, you can see me tomorrow." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for tonight, Jack, for everything." He kissed her again, slow and lingering, a promise of more to come. "Good night, Clara. Dream sweet." Inside, Clara leaned against the closed door, her fingers pressed to her lips, a smile spreading across her face. She felt like she was glowing from the inside out, like every nerve ending was alive with possibility. She had come to Jack Morrison to sell honey from her last hive, desperate and alone and afraid. Instead, she had found something infinitely more precious: hope, opportunity, and the beginning of love. Over the following weeks, Jack became a constant presence in Clara's life. He came by nearly every day, sometimes for hours, sometimes just for a few minutes between ranch duties. They worked together on building up the apiary, constructing more hives and preparing for the possibility of splitting the existing colony in the spring. Jack proved to be a quick learner, listening intently as Clara taught him about bee behavior, about the importance of the queen, about how to move slowly and calmly around the hive to avoid alarming the bees. "They are reading your energy," Clara explained one afternoon as they stood near the active hive, watching the workers come and go. "If you are calm, they stay calm. If you are agitated or afraid, they sense it and react." Jack stood very still, his eyes tracking the flight patterns of the bees. "They really are remarkable. I never paid much attention before, but now I see why you love them so much." "They saved my life," Clara said softly. "If not for that last hive, I would have had nothing to bring you, no reason to come here, and I would have lost everything." She turned to look at him. "In a way, they brought us together." Jack reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then I owe them a debt I can never repay." Their relationship deepened with each passing day, growing from attraction into something richer and more substantial. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's stories, each other's dreams. Jack told her about the loneliness of running the ranch alone, about the pressure he felt to live up to his father's legacy, about his fear that he would spend his whole life working without ever really living. Clara told him about the weight of being the last of her family, about the guilt she felt for not being able to save the other hives, about her terror that she would fail and dishonor her father's memory. "You could never dishonor him," Jack said fiercely. "He would be so proud of you, Clara. Of your strength, your determination, your refusal to give up." "I hope so," Clara whispered, and let herself lean into Jack's embrace, drawing comfort from his solid presence. By mid-October, Clara's single hive was thriving, the bees bringing in pollen from the few remaining wildflowers and the mesquite trees, storing up honey and supplies for winter. It was not enough to harvest yet, but it was a start, a foundation. Clara spent her days working the land, tending the garden that was finally producing vegetables again, thanks to the well that Jack had helped her dig, and preparing for the colder months ahead. She spent her evenings with Jack more often than not, sharing dinners at his ranch or hers, talking and laughing and stealing kisses in the twilight. One evening in late October, as they sat on Clara's porch watching the sun set, Jack cleared his throat in a way that made Clara look over at him curiously. "I have been thinking," he began, sounding uncharacteristically nervous, "about us, about the future." Clara's heart began to beat faster. "What about it? I know we have not been courting for very long, just over a month, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life than I am of this, of us." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I love you, Clara. I am in love with you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you talk to your bees. I love how you never give up, how you face every challenge with courage. I love the way you laugh and the way you think and the way you make me want to be better." Tears were already streaming down Clara's face. "Jack." "Let me finish," he smiled, his own eyes suspiciously bright. I do not want to spend my days without you in them. I do not want to go home to an empty house when I could go home to you. I know it is fast, I know people will talk, but I do not care." He took a deep breath. "Marry me, Clara. Be my wife. Let us build a life together, combine your land with mine, grow your apiary until it is the biggest and best in all of Texas. Let me spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy." Clara was crying in earnest now, but she was also smiling so wide her face hurt. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Jack. I love you so much it terrifies me." Jack pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, passionately, pouring all his love and relief and joy into the embrace. When they broke apart, both were crying and laughing, their foreheads pressed together, their hands tangled in each other's hair and clothes. "When?" Clara asked breathlessly. "Tomorrow, if you want. Next month. Next year, I do not care as long as we end up together." Clara thought about her small cabin, about the winter approaching, about the fact that being married to Jack would mean safety and security not just emotionally but practically. "Soon," she decided. "I do not want to wait, do you? Not even a little bit." They decided on 3 weeks, giving them time to arrange things properly, but not so much time that the waiting would drive them mad. Jack rode into San Antonio the next day to speak with the minister and to send a telegram to his aunt in Dallas, his only living relative. Clara wrote to her cousin in Austin, a woman she had not seen in 2 years, but who deserved to know Clara was getting married. Word spread through the small community quickly, and people Clara barely knew stopped by to offer congratulations and gifts. A set of towels from the seamstress, a hand-carved wooden spoon from the blacksmith's wife, a jar of preserves from the family who ran the small farm north of town. Martha from the general store came by with a knowing smile and a length of beautiful ivory lace. "For your wedding dress, dear. I had a feeling you would be needing it." Clara worked on her dress in the evenings, sewing by lamplight, creating something simple but beautiful, with long sleeves and a high neckline and the lace trim at the cuffs and collar. Jack stayed away during this time, respecting the tradition that he should not see the dress before the wedding, though he sent notes with the ranch hand who delivered fresh supplies every few days. The notes were sweet and romantic, filled with declarations of love and excitement for their future, and Clara treasured every one. The night before the wedding, Clara lay in bed unable to sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of everything that had changed in 2 months. She had gone from desperate and alone to loved and cherished, from losing everything to gaining more than she had ever dreamed possible. It felt like magic, like fate, like the kind of miracle people read about in books, but never expected to experience themselves. The wedding took place on a clear November afternoon, with the sky a brilliant blue overhead and a slight chill in the air that promised winter was on its way. The ceremony was held at Jack's ranch, in front of the house with its wide porch and clean windows, with a small gathering of friends and neighbors as witnesses. Jack's aunt arrived that morning, a handsome woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm embrace. Clara wore her new dress and carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that Jack had somehow found despite the season. And when she walked toward him across the grass, the look on his face made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The minister kept the service simple, speaking about love and commitment and partnership. When it came time for vows, Jack took Clara's hands in his voice strong and steady. "Clara, I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to support your dreams and to work beside you to make them real. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your home. In good times and hard times, in sickness and health, I am yours, completely and forever." Clara's voice shook slightly as she spoke her own vows, but she meant every word. Jack, you came into my life when I had lost everything, and you gave me back hope. You saw me when I felt invisible. You believed in me when I struggled to believe in myself. I promise to love you with everything I am, to be your partner in all things, to build a life with you full of joy and purpose. You are my heart, my home, my everything. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jack kissed her with a tenderness that made Clara's heart ache in the best possible way, and the small crowd erupted in cheers and applause. They celebrated with a simple meal prepared by Jack's Aunt and Martha, with music provided by a ranch hand who played fiddle, with dancing and laughter under the open sky. As the sun began to set, Jack pulled Clara aside, leading her away from the celebration to a quiet spot near the barn. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happier than I knew was possible," Clara replied honestly, looping her arms around his neck. "I love you, Jack Morrison. I love you, Clara Morrison." He grinned at the use of her new name. "Are you ready to start our life together?" "I have been ready since the moment you bought my honey and decided to build me more hives." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me." "You are the easiest choice I ever made," Jack said, and kissed her again as the sky turned orange and pink around them. That night, Clara moved into Jack's ranch house, into the room that was now theirs, and began her new life as Jack's wife. The change was profound and yet felt entirely natural, as if this was where she had always been meant to end up. They fell into routines together, waking early to tackle the day's work, Jack handling the cattle and horses while Clara tended to her bees and the garden. They ate meals together, planned together, made decisions together. Jack taught Clara to ride better, to handle a rope, to shoot a rifle in case she ever needed to protect herself. Clara taught Jack the finer points of beekeeping, of reading the hive's health, of understanding the seasonal rhythms that govern the bees' behavior. As winter settled in, they worked together to prepare both properties for the cold months. They had decided to keep Clara's homestead operational, using it as a dedicated space for the growing apiary and as a future storage facility for honey and equipment. Jack hired a young man named Thomas to help maintain the property and to learn about beekeeping from Clara, giving her an apprentice and an extra set of hands. December brought cold winds and occasional frost, and Clara and Jack spent their evenings huddled close by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking about their days. Clara had never felt so content, so cherished. Jack was an attentive husband, thoughtful and affectionate, always ready with an embrace or a kind word. He continued to surprise her with small gestures. Wildflowers on her pillow, her favorite coffee prepared exactly how she liked it, notes left in unexpected places declaring his love. Christmas arrived and they celebrated quietly, just the two of them, exchanging simple gifts. Jack gave Clara a beautiful wooden box he had carved himself, inlaid with a delicate bee design, perfect for storing her beekeeping tools. Clara gave Jack a hand-knit scarf in deep blue wool, warm and practical. They cooked a special meal together, laughed over Jack's attempt to make pie, made love in front of the fire as snow began to fall outside, rare and beautiful in Texas. "This is the best Christmas I have ever had," Clara murmured as they lay tangled together under a blanket, watching the flames dance. "The first of many," Jack replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Every year will be better than the last. I promise you that." Winter gave way to early spring, and with it came a burst of activity. The rains returned in March, gentle at first and then in glorious, soaking storms that turned the landscape green seemingly overnight. Wildflowers erupted across the fields, and Clara watched with joy as her single hive became more active, the bees flying out to gather pollen and nectar from the sudden abundance. In April, she successfully split the colony, creating 2 strong hives from the one. By May, she had 4 hives, all healthy and productive. Jack was true to his word, helping her build the structures she needed, investing in equipment, spreading the word about her honey to merchants and restaurants in San Antonio and beyond. The first honey harvest in June was modest but high quality, and Clara sold every jar, reinvesting the money into more hives and supplies. Jack stood beside her at the market, proud and supportive, and when people commented on the exceptional quality of the honey, he beamed as if her success was his own. "You should be very proud," an older woman said to Jack as she purchased 3 jars. "Your wife is quite talented." "I know," Jack replied, his eyes on Clara. "I am the luckiest man alive." By summer's end, Clara had 8 healthy hives, and her honey had gained a reputation as the finest in the region. A restaurant owner in San Antonio placed a standing order for 10 jars a month, and the doctor bought her entire supply of medicinal honey for his practice. The money was good, better than Clara had dared hope, and she opened an account at the bank in her own name, feeling a profound satisfaction at seeing her balance grow. One evening in September, exactly 1 year after she had walked onto Jack's property with her single jar of honey, Clara sat on the porch of what was now truly their ranch and looked out at the land with a sense of deep peace. Jack joined her, handing her a cup of tea and settling into the chair beside her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "A year ago I thought my life was ending. I had nothing. I was alone. I could not see a path forward." She turned to look at him, her eyes shining. "And now look at where I am. I have a thriving business, a home, a partner. I have you. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream. It is real. It is what you built through hard work and determination." Jack reached for her hand. "I am proud of you, Clara, so incredibly proud. I could not have done it without you. You gave me the chance to rebuild. You believed in me when I could barely believe in myself." "We did it together," Jack corrected gently. "That is what partners do. We support each other, lift each other up, help each other succeed." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you so much." "I love you too, honeybee." It was his nickname for her, spoken with such affection that it made her melt every time. In October, Clara realized she had missed her monthly cycle. At first, she dismissed it as stress or a fluke, but when a second month passed with the same result, accompanied by morning nausea and exhaustion, she could no longer deny the truth. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a confusing mix of joy and terror. She wanted children, had always wanted them, but the timing felt sudden, overwhelming. She worried about managing the apiary while pregnant, about being a good mother, about whether she was truly ready for this new responsibility. She decided to tell Jack over dinner, cooking his favorite meal and trying to calm her racing thoughts. When they sat down to eat, Jack noticed immediately that something was different. "Are you all right? You seem nervous." Clara took a deep breath. "I am fine. Better than fine, actually." "I have news." Jack set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "What kind of news?" "The good kind. At least I think it is good. I hope you think it is good." She was babbling, her words tumbling over each other. "Jack, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Jack just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming into a grin, and then he was up and around the table, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Clara, we are going to have a baby. That is the best news I have ever heard." Relief flooded through her. "You are happy." Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am thrilled, terrified, excited, all of it at once. He set her down carefully, his hands moving to her still flat stomach. "There is a person in there, our person." Clara laughed, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Our person, I like that." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about everything from names to where the baby would sleep to how they would manage the ranch and apiary with an infant. Jack was adamant that Clara should do less physical labor, should take it easier, should let him and Thomas handle more of the work. Clara resisted at first, not wanting to be treated as fragile, but eventually agreed to a compromise. She would continue to work but would scale back and would stop entirely if the pregnancy became difficult. As the months passed, Clara's belly grew, and with it grew Jack's attentiveness. He was constantly checking on her, bringing her water and snacks, insisting she rest when she had been on her feet too long. It would have been annoying if it was not so clearly coming from a place of deep love and concern. Clara found herself falling even more in love with him, watching him prepare for fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else. Winter came again, and Clara spent more time inside, working on preparing the nursery and making baby clothes. Jack's aunt visited for Christmas, bringing gifts and advice and a cradle that had been in the family for generations. The ranch was prospering, the cattle herd larger than ever, the horse breeding program starting to show real promise. Clara's apiary had expanded to 12 hives, and she had hired a local woman to help process and jar the honey during harvest. They were building something real, something lasting, and the baby growing inside Clara felt like the perfect symbol of their future. On a cold night in March 1883, Clara went into labor. Jack rode to town to fetch the midwife, his horse flying across the dark landscape, and returned with the capable, no-nonsense woman who had delivered half the babies in the county. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Jack stayed by Clara's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement and love. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do anything." Finally, as the sun began to set on the second day, Clara gave one final push, and their son entered the world with a healthy, outraged cry. The midwife cleaned him quickly and placed him in Clara's arms, and both parents stared down at the tiny, perfect person they had created. "He is beautiful," Clara whispered, exhausted and elated. "Look at him, Jack. He is perfect." "He looks like you," Jack said, his voice full of wonder. He reached out a tentative finger to stroke the baby's cheek. "Hello, little one. I am your father." They named him Samuel after Jack's father, with the middle name William after Clara's father. Samuel Morrison, heir to the ranch and the apiary, loved and wanted beyond measure. The first weeks were exhausting, filled with sleepless nights and endless feedings, with learning to care for this tiny, dependent creature. But they navigated it together, Jack taking on extra work so Clara could rest, Clara teaching Jack how to change diapers and swaddle properly. They were a team, just as they had always been. As Samuel grew from infant to baby, from baby to toddler, the ranch and apiary continued to flourish. By the time he was 2 years old, Clara had 20 hives and 2 employees, and her honey was being shipped as far as New Orleans and Kansas City. Jack's horse breeding program had taken off, with buyers coming from across Texas to purchase his well-trained mares and stallions. They had become one of the most successful couples in the region, respected and admired. But their success never changed them at the core. They remained hardworking, humble, and deeply connected to the land and each other. They made decisions together, raised Samuel together, faced challenges together. When drought threatened in the summer of 1884, they worked side by side to dig new wells and irrigate the gardens. When a fever swept through San Antonio that winter, they opened their home to neighbors who needed care, trusting in Clara's medicinal honey and Jack's strength to keep their own family safe. In the spring of 1885, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, there was no fear, only joy and excitement. Samuel, now 3 years old, was thrilled at the prospect of a sibling, though he did not quite understand what it meant. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and in December, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Mary, after both their mothers. Rose came into the world more quietly than Samuel had, with a serious expression that made the midwife laugh. "This one is going to be a thinker," the midwife predicted, and she was right. Rose was a calm, observant baby, content to watch the world with wide eyes, so different from her energetic brother. With 2 children, life became busier but also richer. Jack proved to be a natural father, patient and loving, teaching Samuel to ride and help with the horses while also gentle and attentive with baby Rose. Clara balanced motherhood with running the apiary, helped by her growing team and by Jack's unwavering support. They had built the life they dreamed of, full of purpose and love and hard work that felt meaningful. Years passed in a blur of seasons and small moments that added up to a life well lived. Samuel grew into a responsible, kind-hearted boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Rose developed a fascination with the bees, following Clara around the apiary from the time she could walk, asking endless questions about how the hives worked. By the time she was 6, she was helping Clara with basic tasks, showing a natural aptitude for beekeeping that filled Clara with pride. In 1888, when Samuel was 7 and Rose was 3, the family traveled to Dallas for Jack's aunt's 70th birthday. It was the first time Clara and the children had been to a real city, and they spent a week exploring, visiting museums and parks, eating at restaurants and staying in a hotel. Samuel was wide-eyed with excitement, Rose more reserved but clearly taking everything in. Jack held Clara's hand as they walked through the city streets, and she marveled at how far they had come from that desperate morning when she had arrived at his ranch with a single jar of honey. "Do you ever miss it?" Jack asked one evening as they sat on the hotel balcony, watching the city lights. "The quiet of the ranch, a little," Clara admitted, "but I am happy to be here to show the children the world beyond our land. I want them to know there is more out there, even if they choose to come back home. We raised them right. Whatever they choose, they will make us proud." The trip home was long but pleasant, the children chattering about everything they had seen. When the ranch finally came into view, Clara felt a surge of love and belonging. This was home, this land they had built together, this life they had created from nearly nothing. The apiary continued to expand, eventually reaching 30 hives, the largest operation in the region. Clara trained Rose as she got older, teaching her everything she knew, and Rose absorbed it all with the same dedication Clara had brought to her own learning. Samuel, meanwhile, became Jack's right hand, learning every aspect of ranching and horse breeding, showing a natural talent for working with animals. In 1892, when Samuel was 11 and Rose was 7, Clara and Jack celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Jack had planned a special dinner, sending the children to stay with Martha in town for the night so he and Clara could have the house to themselves. He cooked her favorite foods, set the table with candles and flowers, and after dinner, he took her outside to the spot where they had been married. 10 years, he said, pulling her close, and I love you more now than I did the day we married. I feel the same, Clara said, resting her head against his chest. You have given me everything, Jack, A home, a family, a purpose. You saw me when I was at my lowest and you helped me rise." "We rose together," Jack corrected, as he always did. "Everything we have, we built as partners." They danced under the stars with no music but the wind and the distant sounds of the ranch, and Clara thought about that terrified young woman who had walked onto this property a decade ago. She had been so afraid, so uncertain, so desperate. But she had taken a chance, had accepted help, had opened her heart to possibility. And in return, she had received more than she ever could have imagined. More years flowed by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. They weathered droughts and storms, disease and accidents, the normal trials of life on a ranch. They celebrated Samuel's graduation from school, Rose's first solo management of a hive, anniversaries and birthdays and holidays. They grew older together, their love deepening and maturing, becoming as much a part of the landscape as the land itself. In 1895, when Samuel was 14, a young man approached Jack about buying one of his horses. The man was a rancher from New Mexico, and he brought his daughter with him, a bright, confident girl named Alina who was exactly Samuel's age. The two young people struck up an immediate friendship, talking about horses and ranching with the easy enthusiasm of people who had found a kindred spirit. Over the next few years, as the rancher made regular trips to purchase horses, Samuel and Alina's friendship deepened into something more. Jack and Clara watched it happen with knowing smiles, remembering their own swift, certain courtship. Rose, meanwhile, had become an expert beekeeper by age 13, innovative and thoughtful, already making improvements to Clara's methods. She talked about maybe going to an agricultural college someday, about learning more about entomology and honey production. Clara encouraged her, even as she secretly hoped Rose would come back and take over the apiary when she was ready. The turn of the century came, ushering in 1900 with celebrations and reflections on how much had changed. Clara was 41 now, Jack 44, their children nearly grown. The ranch sprawled across twice the acreage it had when Clara first arrived. The apiary had 40 hives and employed 6 people, and they had built a life of comfort and security. But more than that, they had built a life of love, of partnership, of shared dreams realized. In the summer of 1901, Samuel, now 20 years old, married Alina in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch. Clara watched her son pledge his love and thought about her own wedding day, about how nervous and hopeful she had been, about how all her hopes had been realized and exceeded. Samuel and Alina settled in a house Jack had built for them on the northern edge of the property, and within a year, they presented Clara and Jack with their first grandchild, a boy named Jack after his grandfather. Holding her grandson for the first time, Clara felt the circle of life complete itself. She had come to Texas with nothing, had been saved by honey and a cowboy's kindness, had built an empire of bees and love. Now she held the next generation in her arms, a baby who would grow up knowing security and affection, who would inherit the legacy she and Jack had created. Rose, at 17, showed no signs of wanting to marry anytime soon, much to Clara's amusement. She was too focused on her bees, on her studies, on her plans to revolutionize honey production in Texas. She had her father's determination and her mother's skill, and Clara knew she would accomplish remarkable things. In the spring of 1903, Clara and Jack took a trip alone together for the first time in years, leaving the ranch in Samuel's capable hands and the apiary in Rose's. They traveled to the coast, something neither had ever done, and spent a week walking on beaches, eating fresh seafood, and simply enjoying each other's company without the demands of work and family. On their last evening, they sat on the beach watching the sunset, and Jack turned to Clara with a serious expression. "You have any regrets?" he asked. "Anything you wish had been different?" Clara thought about it carefully, running through the years in her mind. "No," she said finally. "Not a single one. My life has been exactly what it was meant to be." She looked at him, this man who had changed everything. "You bought all my honey and built me more hives, but what you really did was see me, believe in me, and love me. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." Jack pulled her close, kissing her with the same passion he had shown on their wedding day. "You saved me too, you know. I did not realize how lonely I was until you arrived. You gave me purpose beyond just running a ranch. You gave me a life worth living." They returned home refreshed and reconnected, ready to face whatever came next. The years continued to flow, bringing more grandchildren, more successes, more challenges overcome together. In 1906, Rose left for college, the first in either family to do so, studying entomology and agriculture. She came home for holidays filled with stories and new ideas, her excitement infectious. When she graduated in 1910, at age 24, she returned to the ranch and immediately began implementing innovations that increased honey production and hive health. Samuel took over more and more of the ranching duties as Jack grew older, running the operation with the same integrity and care his father had shown. Alina proved to be an excellent partner, managing the financial side of things with sharp intelligence. They had 3 children together, all healthy and happy, and the ranch house rang with the sounds of family gatherings and celebrations. In 1915, Clara and Jack celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered for a massive party, with neighbors and friends coming from miles around to honor the couple who had become legends in their own right. People told stories about Clara's miraculous honey, about Jack's generosity and fairness, about the empire they had built from a single jar and a leap of faith. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Clara and Jack found themselves alone on the porch, watching the stars just as they had done countless times before. 30 years, Clara said softly. "It feels like a lifetime and like no time at all." "It has been the best 30 years of my life," Jack replied, his arm around her shoulders. "Every single day with you has been a gift, even the hard days. The drought years and the sick cattle and the times we struggled, especially those days. Because we faced them together and we came through stronger." He turned to look at her, his eyes still as warm and loving as they had been when he first kissed her. "I would do it all again, every moment, just to end up here with you." Clara leaned into him, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart that had been her anchor for 3 decades. "I love you, Jack Morrison, more than words can express." "I love you too, Clara Morrison, my honeybee, my heart, my home." They sat together as the night deepened, surrounded by the life they had built, the land they had tended, the love they had nurtured. Clara thought about that desperate morning when she had walked onto this ranch with nothing but a jar of honey and a prayer. She had been seeking a buyer, a transaction, a way to survive another day. Instead, she had found a partner, a lover, a future. She had found home. The apiary thrived under Rose's management, becoming known throughout the state and beyond. The ranch prospered under Samuel's care, the cattle and horses healthy and valuable. The grandchildren grew, some showing interest in bees, others in horses, all of them loved and guided by Clara and Jack, who had become the heart of an extended family. In the years that followed, Clara and Jack gradually stepped back from daily operations, trusting their children to carry on what they had started. They spent their days together, working in the garden, visiting with grandchildren, taking slow rides across the property they loved. They grew old together with grace and gratitude, each day a gift, each moment treasured. Rose eventually married a kind entomologist she met through her work, a man who shared her passion for bees and her commitment to innovation. They settled in a house on the property and had 2 children of their own, expanding the family further. Samuel's children grew into capable young adults, some staying on the ranch, others venturing out to seek their own fortunes, all carrying with them the values Clara and Jack had instilled. On a warm evening in 1925, Clara and Jack sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the years, but their love as strong as ever. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of bees returning to their hives, the gentle lowing of cattle, the laughter of grandchildren playing in the yard. "We did it," Clara said softly. "We built something real, something lasting." "We did," Jack agreed, holding her hand. "And it all started with honey." "It started with you," Clara corrected. "You saw me, you helped me, you loved me, and you let me. That took courage." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and amber, the same colors as the honey that had brought them together all those years ago. Around them, the ranch hummed with life and purpose, a testament to what could be built when 2 people came together with love and determination. Clara leaned her head against Jack's shoulder, feeling the peace that came from a life well lived, from choices made with courage, from love given and received freely. She had come to sell him honey from her last hive, desperate and alone. He had bought it all and built her more, seeing not just her need but her worth, her potential, her strength. Together, they had created something far more valuable than any amount of honey, a legacy of love, family, and partnership that would endure for generations. As the stars began to appear overhead, Clara closed her eyes and said a silent prayer of gratitude for the day she walked onto Jack Morrison's ranch, for the kindness of a cowboy who became her husband, for every moment of the beautiful life they had built together. It had been more than she could have dreamed, more than she could have hoped, more than she had ever dared to imagine possible, and it had all started with honey.